So, Polly, today
Yes.
on Totally Preventable, we're having Dan Fitzgerald as our guest.
Love Dan.
Dan is a good guy. I've only met him once, but I've seen his work and heard a lot about him. But he's got quite the resume.
He does. He's been in prevention since he was a little kid.
Yeah. I've seen some of the pictures where they don't look very different from right now.
Still small.
just that added facial hair. That's about it. But I'm pretty excited. He's I don't want to say most known for, but what I'm most known from is the Lung Association, American Lung Association, and the Chariho Youth Task Force. But I believe you told me he's involved with Truth.
He is
as well.
He is, yeah. But I know him most from the Chariho Youth Task Force.
Mm-hmm.
He's had some great initiatives there. He can really get his youth engaged. He's got a huge group of well-spoken, well-educated, motivated, excited to be part of change in their community group of young people.
That is great.
Yeah,
that is great. I want to get his take on why he might feel that youth are key.
Mm-hmm.
With everyone just trying to throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. It's important. To know why youth add to the possible solutions of a lot of the things that we're dealing with in prevention.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be great, I think, to hear.
Yep.
Pick his brain, see what he's willing to release as his key. He's
always willing to answer questions and share. Yep. And
that's good.
If I reach out to him and he doesn't know, connect me to someone who does. He's a great a great support system. He's a great person to know in the business. He knows a lot of people and is very helpful. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you ready for this one?
I am very ready.
All right. Without further ado, let's bring it back. Without further ado, Totally Preventable with Dan Fitzgerald.
We're here today with Dan Fitzgerald. Dan is the National Senior Manager of Advocacy and at the American Lung Association. This is a mouthful. So the Executive Director at the Chariho Youth Task Force and a trainer and mentor of activism at Truth.
Whoa.
So welcome, Dan.
Quite the resume there, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me. Exciting to join you today.
It's nice to see you. So you do a whole lot of things, even more than that's on this list. As I'm thinking now, there's other things that I'd love to talk about as well. But could you tell us more about your job with the American Lung Association?
Sure, yeah. So I have actually worked at the American Lung Association for about 5.5 years now. And my role has changed a lot in that time. I actually first started directing Tobacco Free Rhode Island, which is a network-based organization. As you know, we work with all of our prevention coalitions throughout our state and other organizations, all working to reduce the impact that tobacco has here in the small but mighty state of Rhode Island. From there, I have done a lot of our advocacy and public policy work here in Rhode Island and do some other, I have a portfolio of other national advocacy work that I do. And a lot of that work ultimately is related to, a big portion of that is tobacco control and prevention. Some of that is around access to quality, affordable healthcare. And I do some other interesting things around kind of air quality and lung health and things like that.
Wow. Now, when talking to youth about lung health, how do you go about that? Like, how do you bring that conversation to capture their curiosity?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Greg, because for me, I actually started getting interested in this work when I was really, really young. So I joined my local prevention coalition. My mom and I went there. I think I was like 10, probably 9 or 10 years old when we attended our first coalition meeting down in the southern part of the state where I live. Grew up in Richmond and spent most of my life in Hopkinton. And that was where I started seeing how substance use impacted not only my family, which what brought us there, but also my whole community. And some of the first work I started doing was seeing that, you could smoke at the ball field where, me and my siblings, my cousins, and friends from school where we were playing t-ball. So one of the first things that was really exciting for me was working with my coalition, and it wasn't called Tobacco Free Rhode Island then, but the Lung Association and what's now TFRI, they came down and supported me and my peers in making what's now been for about 15 years now a smoke-free environment, which is really cool. So it was one of those things that it's not the sexiest, coolest topic, right? Oftentimes,
Right.
a lot of the work that we do isn't the number one front of mind issue for our communities. So it was about figuring out, and what I kind of fell in love with was figuring out what is it that's going to make people interested and come to the table and talk about it, and making it really human for something that, and with your question around lung health, especially when it comes to anything related to tobacco, there's a lot of stigma.
Right.
And one of the things that in all of my work, I always try to kick it off anytime I'm giving a presentation about tobacco or e-cigarettes. I start off with something that sounds counterproductive, but I promise it's not. And I always start off by saying, smokers are not bad people, right? If you are anything like me, you have wonderful, beautiful folks in your life who have been, dependent or addicted to nicotine. It's something really hard to quit. So if we add shame and stigma onto it, it makes it even harder. So I find the biggest thing that I really enjoy, but can be a real challenge working in the lung health space and in the prevention space, is about kind of breaking down those barriers, that stigma, so that you can really talk about the root cause. Because I do think the things we care about a lot more similar than they are different.
And when I think of the Lung Association, I think of conventional cigarettes, but you mentioned e-cigarettes, and we're hearing a lot about vaping. It's increased immensely with kids, and there's been a new ruling around Juul. I've got to say, I know Juul really pushed their product on kids, or it appeared that way, but there are other vaping companies that are equally to blame. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, because when it comes to commercial tobacco products, the ones that we've been talking about forever, things like smokeless tobacco products and cigarettes, we have decades and decades and decades of not just the data about what it looks like in our community and usage, but also because of the master settlement agreement in the late 90s, we literally have their playbooks, right? They had to hand those over in those lawsuits. And if you've never been to the tobacco library where all those are housed over in California, if you're a tobacco nerd like me, I definitely recommend a trip over there. But it wasn't very busy for some reason. But we know, right, what they were doing, so we weren't learning it right as young people were experiencing it. So kind of fast forward, while there is a lot of things that we can draw similarities, especially since a lot of these e-cig companies and products are being pushed and funded by the same people that we've been up against for decades now. But really kind of here we are now, even, I'm only 27 years old. E-cigarettes were not a big part of my high school career. I remember maybe at the very tail end of it, because I was a part of and running some prevention work, I was hearing about it, but it was not an issue I had to face. Fast forward, months, not even years, and that is a huge part of the culture of what it means to be a young person. And they were experiencing that at the same time that prevention specialists were trying to learn about it, prevent it, and make sure that everything we're doing is rooted in fact. So there's a lot of nuance there that made that especially challenging. The piece where I think that policy and practice and prevention all come together is where there has been some really great opportunity that I think was really not used in the best way, where this could have been totally preventable, right? We have all of this knowledge, like we were just talking about, knowing what works, what didn't work, and what we're up against. And now fast forward with e-cigarettes, we know, the FDA got the authority to start working on these products years ago. So none of them are necessarily regulated in the sense that we would think about regulation, but they have the authority to actually start checking and seeing if things should be for sale. And there's a lot more nuance. We could spend hours talking just about that piece, but they delayed that by years. So the Lung Association of some of our other public health partners actually sued the FDA, and we won that lawsuit back in 2019. And it basically found that if the FDA acted when they had the authority to do so, that the e-cigarette epidemic, as we know it now, could have been totally preventable. And that's really, really, really frustrating as prevention folks, as parents, as young people, as educators to think about that. So now a lot of that, and of course, COVID delayed some of it, but now some of that pre-market review process is coming to an end. So the big piece now is I think FDA needs to be able to operate at the full extent of their authority. And I think the American people, our government, needs to hold these companies accountable. I had the really cool opportunity. I was in DC and was able to sit in the room as the 7 of the biggest e-cigarette CEOs were sitting there testifying before Congress, very similar to maybe a photo we've seen from the late 90s. In some of really paraphrasing here, but the vibe of the room was, we're not marketing to kids. Didn't know these were, we've never pretended they're going to help people quit, barely knew they were addictive. And it is, in the TFRI office at the Lung Association, we have a big 6-foot photo of the tobacco industry lying to the American people back in the MSA, and it's like the same photo, maybe a little bit more modern of clothes,
color.
photo, a little more color,
Yeah.
right next to it, and it's that flashback. But yeah.
Wow. Now we have the tendency, especially in prevention, we like to celebrate every victory. And, when we heard the ruling about the e-cigarettes and the Juul, we are excited, but then we have to quickly think about the alternative. Now, there are a bunch of youth who are very reliant on this, addicted. And do you know of any active cessation programs for youth in the area?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because as you all know, I feel like it can very easily, we get into what I call public health whack-a-mole. It's this product here, or sometimes it's even different substances. And while we should be able to celebrate and see these wins in prevention, what about the folks who are stuck there in the middle? Whether we're talking about an age of sale law, whether we're talking about point of sale, or whether we're talking about actual products being for sale or not. So I do think we have the responsibility as the public health field to talk about those things in the same breath. Love this, and need to do this. So there are some really great things going on. So now the Rhode Island Department of Health is putting a big investment into a new addition to their quit lines. As we know, there's a tobacco helpline that they do staff, and people can get free nicotine replacement therapy as a part of that. So that's really wonderful. They also now are doing a big investment in a teen-based program, and that's called My Life, My Quit. So it's staffed through National Jewish Health. It's the same folks who are running our quit line here in Rhode Island, and that's a really great free program, and it's also available by text. Other organizations, one of those first text programs was actually run by Truth Initiative and the Truth Campaign. That was called This Is Quitting. Wasn't as much cessation, but it was very much about the support for a young person going through that. So both of those are really great programs. And I do know, there's a lot more that still needs to be done around, better understanding the evidence of effectiveness for traditional, cessation products like nicotine replacement therapy for young folks, because now even just looking at the things we know that work, and even knowing they work, sometimes takes 7, 9, 12 times for adults to use those products successfully and have a sustained quit attempt. But now looking to sometimes with certain levels of e-cigarettes, we're talking about an even higher level of dependence on nicotine. So the whole idea of those products is to make sure that folks aren't having such intense withdrawal so that they can be more successful and have longer or potentially permanent, quit results. So if you are a young person, even if you are eligible and using those products, sometimes you may be experiencing that dramatic withdrawal. And now that's, even if you are able to utilize one of those products, it can make that process a really challenging one. So a lot of great stuff out there that we didn't even quite have just a few years ago, but certainly more to come.
Good. That's good to know, because I hear a lot of people just say, "Oh, just quit. These kids need to just throw those vapes away. They need to just quit."
Think of that. Yeah. What?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe just because they're kids, they can do that. But I mean, I know a lot of adults that are still smoking and can't, and wish they weren't. So I don't know why they think that will just relate for kids to just quit. But so I'm going to go from a transition from kids to other kids, and where I first met you, and where I really love your work is at the Chariho Youth Task Force, which I struggle with because all our Rhode Island task forces have really changed their name to coalitions. So you're going old school.
Yeah. So again, our name and logo was made by some middle schoolers a decade and a half ago. So and yeah, that is one of the pieces I find myself really lucky to be a part of. Some really exciting work, and there's no shortage of great things going on in our state here. But yeah, I feel really lucky to be a part of the work down in Chariho. So for those, I find even sometimes folks here in Rhode Island don't quite know what Chariho is. It's not technically a place. Our old superintendent used to say it's not a place on a map, it's a state of mind. But Chariho is basically an acronym. It stands for Charlestown, Richmond, and Hopkinton. So we're a tri-town school district, 3 separate town governments. The one federally recognized sovereign nation, the Narragansett tribe, is also butts that area. And yeah, really 3 very different towns who, as we all, faced with, can sometimes be a challenge to come bring all together. But what I fell in love with, as I was mentioning earlier, I joined our local coalition who had been working for about 30 years, similar to a lot of the other great coalitions in our state. And I was one of the only young people at that table. And I fell in love with a coalition model where, people who all thought differently, came from different walks of life, were able to come together and use their lived experience to move forward the work we were doing. So I wanted to, work on creating that where the loudest voice was the young person. So that's where, that's what started the Chariho Youth Task Force. Several of those young people, who were, our kind of founding members, some are on payroll and doing some great stuff with us now, or supporters out in the community. Some have kids who are now, part of some of that work. And it's been a really, really exciting time. So just a few years ago, we, formalized our 501c3 status. We also merged forces with the task force that was prior working in that community. So we are now the organization who is running substance use prevention, mental health promotion. We also have a community health worker and some youth organizers as a part of our team now. So we're really looking at broader health promotion and working on using some of our 15 years of lessons learned and working in some other communities in Washington County as well. We have some work going on in North Kingstown and in Westerly as well, which is exciting.
So being so involved in the coalition at such a young age, and with all the prevention work that you're doing now, can you tell us a few programs that you've initiated?
Yeah, I think, one of my favorite parts of coalition work is when you do it really well. It's, I always say that it should be difficult to say one person who did it, right? So, all of these things are a super collaborative effort. But some of the things that I'm, most proud about or most excited about, one of which I truly had no involvement in the idea. It was more so the success piece for me was, our goal was always to, as I said, create a table where the loudest voice was a young person. But to do that, we also needed to make a table where people felt safe, seen, and valued. And that to me was our biggest success when we were able to, even though the reason why I was, trying to build that table was pretty clear at the time, was substance use prevention. And we've grown in a lot of ways, not because of really any other reason besides the passion and lived experience of young people who are coming to our table. And now, we have coalition members of all ages who are help impacting that work. But one of the things that came out of that is a campaign that we call Everybody is Beautiful. And that campaign came from a young person at our table saying, this is great, the work that we're doing, but an eating disorder has impacted my life for the last 10 years, and it impacts my life every single day, all day long. And that student shared about, some of that seed was planted through books they had to read in school. And I remember the quote that always sticks with me was they said that I was taught from a very young age that I had more worth if there was less of me. And that was one thing that just crushed me. I had to learn a lot. I knew nothing about that space, but all I knew was we promised a safe space where you could be seen and heard. And what our mission was really to give a platform for the voices of young people in our community. And, so all we did at the start, because we didn't know what to do with that, is we created a poster board that said, everybody is beautiful. And we stood behind it. We didn't know what was going to come from there. Rebecca and our team was really one of the real passion behind that. She has since illustrated a children's book that as of last week is available on Amazon worldwide, which is really exciting. So we have a published children's book that talks about in a very age appropriate way what is body positivity. We have hosted community gatherings in our school district. We have a little clear sticker that says everybody's beautiful and a link to resources on every mirror and every throughout the middle school and high school and in staff bathrooms. And it's been a really incredible learning experience, one that we've found means something different for our BIPOC students. It meant something different for students that were differently abled. This campaign meant something different for them. For our LGBTQ plus students, that campaign meant something different for them. And so that's something that I have a lot of real excitement about, taking a model of amplifying voices and using it in a way that if it was just me saying this is what we're doing, we would have never went there. It was never something in the back of my mind until it was elevated to that. But yeah,
I think, sorry to cut you off.
I want to know the name of the book before we change subject.
Go for it.
it's called Everybody is Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll send you the link, but we're really excited. We worked with our local Rotary Club and did a hand-drawn version that we printed locally, and now it's been republished in a digital art format that's has some activities, and we have a little curricula that goes with it, and it's been a really exciting kind of living, breathing campaign for us.
I just wanted to give the kudos. I just caught something, a little gem, as you were describing Everybody is Beautiful. And it was a youth that came and you had this safe space for youth. But the one thing that stuck out to me amongst, your description was how you put those clear stickers even in the staff bathrooms. So it just resonated like this can happen to anyone.
Yeah,
and that was real powerful to me. Great job. I think that was a really good move.
And maybe also remind adults not to put any worth on a student about
exactly
how they may appear too. Right?
Yeah, I think most people probably would have just kept the focus on just the youth and forget about, there could be an adult going through this same exact issue. So a big kudos for that. That was great.
So I know that we usually focus on substance abuse and prevention, and but what I do love about the Chariho Youth Task Force is that you really encompass a lot of things that I don't even know if I can think of any kind of substance misused program that you've had. But I think I remember a mental health initiative, maybe around stress and reducing stress and keeping your mental health. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So we launched, this was probably about 8 years ago, but we launched it, and it's now turned into, we still do a lot of work with it. It was called Stand Up to Stigma, Let's Talk About Mental Health. And it really started again from that youth experience of saying, we want to get our community talking about mental illness, but they're not even ready or at the point of, having the capacity to understand that we all have mental health. So that was a really big piece there. And we have some really incredible resources. We worked with a drama therapist to kind of build out a presentation that we actually toured around the country and around our state, which is really exciting. And it was really around educating folks around, so we had common knowledge about mental health and mental illness, and then moving that forward to say, this is how, stress impacts daily life. This is how stress impacts substance use. This is how stress impacts other physical health. And it's been a really interesting piece in the pandemic. One of our first ways that we really had to pivot was we were as a lot of our coalitions are, the epitome of like, you have a space for a table, like I already have it in my car, we'll be there, And when there was no there, then it was out, how do we continue to reach people, especially in this moment of our history where they probably need it more than ever? So we created a QR code sign initiative. So we assembled on our website, charihoyouth.org, we have a mental health tab that's broken out into 3 main buttons: I need help now, local resources, and stress reduction, which are more the preventative resources. And each of those, it's been a living, breathing process there. But we laser engrave this QR code with a signage that says, "You are not alone. Scan here for mental health resources." And we put those. We worked with our partners to put them at hiking spots, near bridges. We put them in gun shops and in barber shops. We put them at the very back of the field where you wouldn't think anybody was, but our partner said, "I know I see people here in the evenings." And we didn't know what was going to come from it. Our first full year of the program, we had over 15,000 unique scans. And what we do in the back end, we're able to see what's the first action they take. So of course, there's some folks who don't do anything. There's some folks who click, "I need help now," and we're completing a call from there. The majority of folks were clicking stress reduction. And that allowed us to really tailor our programming to say, wow, our community's actively real time telling us where they need, what kind of resources they need the most right now. And again, that came from, the idea of young people around our table who, we're like, well, let's just do it this way. And, I'm like, how are we going to get signs, and how are we going to get them to people, and I was sharing at a meeting yesterday. I remember one of our students said, well, that's like 3 things: assemble resources, print signs, and get them out. We can do 3 things. It's like, you're right. Okay, let's get going. Yes, and that's been a really exciting program. And we actually use that mental health resource and presentation as a kind of anchor point of a lot of our other programming. We do an alternative to suspension program at our school district. So for any student who breaks the school substance use policy, now we work with them to revise the policy. This is 3 school years ago. So they don't get suspended. They come to an educational retreat program that we put on each month. And as a part of that, whether they're there for a cannabis infraction, whether they're for alcohol or opioids or e-cigarettes, every single one of them goes through, we talk about healthy behavior change. We go through a full program on better understanding stress and how that's interconnected. And then of course we talk about addiction, dependence, and tolerance. And then we go into each substance more specifically. And of course, at the beginning of that, they think it's a punishment, and there's, we really work to break that down to then talk about like, all this is about is spending time, getting new information, of course, but having a caring group of adults say, you're redeemable, we believe in you, and ask some questions. And it's been some really cool things that kind of, we see that change from this is a punishment to this is an opportunity usually happen in that mental health and stress, where we're kind of taking the blame off and saying, let's look at everything that we're dealing with and kind of validating that for the young person. So that's been a really cool, living, breathing campaign turned curricula for our team for sure.
That is awesome work. That is great. Now, looking at your website, you see great things like the zombie walk and the mocktail competition and fit in the fit in initiative. You see it, and not only do you see that, but you see the joy in the face. Except for the zombie walk, there's there's no happy in those faces. But what is the key to youth engagement? I mean, when you look at just the zombie walk, it's a massive amount of youth engaged. Like, what is your trick? What is your secret?
Yeah, I think the secret sauce is collaboration, and I think it's around it was I don't know who says this quote, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's been always, whether it's my work with the Lung Association or TFRI, or work that I've done with launching youth engagement with the Truth Initiative, or down here in my community with Chariho, it's always been around get folks at a table. And even if you have a very clear vision of this is what I want to do, I think humble leadership is about being told you're wrong and being okay with that and celebrating that, and working to bring folks to that point. And then it's not just you saying, come on board, this is what I'm doing. It's them saying, this is what we're doing, and this is what I need from you. And that's been a really exciting piece. Even with the zombie walk, that was a great, I actually started helping out with that statewide piece as a young person. And then when I transitioned into professionally working at the Lung Association with TFRI, running that as an adult, and it's been a really cool process to see that. But I think, it's very easy to, and I'm a data nerd, so I love the data aspect, and I believe really heavily in evidence-based programming, but also making sure there's room for the feel-good things, but also the things that get people excited. Because once you get there, then as an evaluator or as prevention specialist, it's our job to then figure out how do we work on connecting the dots to all the other obligations that we have to funders or to our boards or to our communities as a whole, in giving the platform to young people to say, this is what we need, and then kind of go from there. So I think, it's just a big piece around, collaboration has always been the key.
I got to take part in the zombie walk.
Really?
Yeah. I think it might have been Dan that gave me some zombie.
I feel like I might have,
Yeah.
Zombie look.
Zombie look. Yes, I got mistaken. I often get mistaken as Rebecca, but even in makeup, I got mistaken as Rebecca at the same time.
You look like Rebecca would look if she was a zombie. Okay. Now we know.
So we know why it's important to have youth's voice at the table, but we often have discussions with people that feel like they know better. They know better than youth. Why is it important to have youth at the table and listen to them and value their opinion?
Just asking that question, makes my day. I love that. And I think, so often we think, that, young people are the leaders of tomorrow. And as cheesy as it is, they're the leaders of right now. And I think there is if you're dismissing all young people, or even just any young people, because it's maybe challenging to get them in the room, or like, oof, it's like herding cats, you're missing a huge part of what it means to live in the communities that we're serving. And I think the important piece of engaged young people is around really setting the precedence that they're a major stakeholder in our communities. And I think once I don't want to say ignore, because I think it's important to validate all perspectives, but when we kind of remove this is the way we've always done it off the table, then a lot of really incredible things can happen. And I also think it's important to, be okay with knowing that, being humble enough and to say, wow, I wouldn't have done it that way, or not sure if this is going to work. And young people are really resilient. And also, I think we don't always give them the credit of knowing that, well, they wouldn't understand that our money can only do this. They're probably more in tune with that than many adults are, because they're constantly being told, this is the way you have to live your life. You have to be here. You don't have the autonomy over this and that. So bringing them into some of those big, courageous conversations, you quickly realize a lot of them really know that. The other piece that I love about, when I was going through, my, really late middle school, early high school into kind of college age in this space, I was going through with the mindset, I want to be taken seriously. So I was emphasizing like young adult. I can't wait to be just the adult here. And so I was often going through trainings and opportunities with, oh, geez, I should have known this. Where some of, the students that I work with, and, Rebecca on our team was the one who maybe put it into words for me, was, why have I never been taught this? Not the I should have known this. And it was a really interesting piece. And, she took, things like the trans-theoretical model of change. I remember I learned that a little bit during my prevention stuff. I learned that when I was doing my MPH, but it was always the, okay, yep, I should have known that, like that makes sense. And for her was like, the way this is presented doesn't make sense, but young people need to know this. So let's make it in a way that's accessible to community members and young people, regardless of their level of education. And just thinking about a problem that way, it's not just about, okay, y'all need to catch up. It's, you need to make this accessible to me, because that's not fair that just because I don't know these big words that I shouldn't know this information. And I think that framing is the way that we become better community organizers, that we better meet the needs of our communities. And I think who better to help keep us accountable than the young people who are growing up in that community,
Absolutely.
You mentioned, taking, this is the way we've always done it, off the table. I mean, I've sat at quite a bit of conference tables where this is the way we always done it. That's a heavy piece of furniture to take off the table.
Yeah. Oftentimes that's the table, the chairs, the floor, the ceiling. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
Let's meet in the field. Let's do this. Yeah.
So how do you guide youth away from their known toxic social norms? How do you do that?
Yeah. I think, it was recently, we've been working on some projects related to queer inclusive prevention and more things tailored to the LGBTQ plus community. And I was on a panel and I was asked the question, like, what is, queer inclusive prevention? And I have kind of the same answer as, what is youth prevention? And I think at its absolute simplest form, everybody wants to feel safe, seen, and valued. People want a place to belong. And I think for the young people who, whether you're in, parts of Chariho or down in Little Compton or in the middle of Providence, and if you feel like you are alone, whether you are or not, whether you're feeling those ways and feeling different, it's about finding a place that feels mutually beneficial, where you feel accepted and celebrated just as you are. And I think that is the biggest key piece, because I think a lot of really beautiful things can happen when you know that somebody who isn't just obligated to, that somebody actually believes in you. And I think it takes a lot of effort to be, aspiring allies, to be comforting adults. But I think that's really the power of it, is not just saying it out loud, although that helps, but truly putting it in action, that, we believe in you, and being, able to follow through with that, I think is a really, really important part to, not just going fast and of course there's always the, the not as fun things that we have to do. But those things become a lot easier when folks know that they're at a space where, just as they are, they're accepted there, regardless of whatever, they're bringing in the room with them.
And I want to thank you for giving us permission to print all the terrific LGBTQ information and pamphlets. They're actually, excuse me, Greg, for 1 minute. They're all right over here behind me. And they went with us to Pride events. And it is so wonderful to see young people being excited to see that we have material that includes them.
And parents.
And well,
Yeah.
and then I was going to say, and it was nice to see some older people, parents, grandparents, be very interested in having some literature to read and help them out. So thank you. And so we still have questions, and I have a million questions in my head, but I want to be mindful of your time. I know that you have another appointment after this, but my big question, you ready? How's Hank? What's Hank up to? How is Hank?
Our hamster Hank is wonderful. Hank, we recently just moved, and I don't think he knows we moved, but he's
still at the old place.
yes, he has a huge 40-gallon tank. He lives well here. He's well loved, and yes, he's doing great.
I love the picture of him pushing the little shopping cart. That's my favorite.
That was we like to make sure that his environment is enriching, so we try to change it up as often as possible.
Nice.
Some days he's climbing, it's
I think Hank should have his own Instagram.
I'll bring it up.
All right. He could promote all the Chariho. Yeah, he could have a little everybody's beautiful t-shirt. He could be reading the book.
Hamster clothes. There we go.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan. Really, I have like a million more questions I want to ask you, but I appreciate your time. We appreciate you and everything that you do for all of our youth and our state.
Now, for any parents or any organizations that want to get in touch with you or want to hear more about these programs and initiatives, how do they do that? Where can they contact you?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving me a platform to talk about the things that bring me a lot of joy. And I would love for folks to reach out. So our website is charihoyouth.org, and my email is dan@charihoyouth.org. So feel free to reach out, learn more about what we're doing. Always look forward to connecting with folks who are doing some great stuff throughout our state and beyond. So thanks
And
for
those
having me.
looking for lung association information,
If you're interested in some of the work that we're doing at the American Lung Association or Tobacco for Rhode Island, my email there is daniel.fitzgerald@lung.org. And the Tobacco Free Rhode Island website is tobaccofree-ri.org.
Thank you.
Good thing Greg's here. I'm only interested in Hank's. Thanks so much, Dan. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Having me.
Bye-bye.